Good morning. I am heading out to my local park. It's December 1st, and after having pretty much given up on any chance of fall color, just the other night it seemed like everything kind of popped overnight. And so I'm heading out to the local park to see what I find in terms of that fall color. Things were still looking really good yesterday. I just wasn't able to get out. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, just kind of a trace amount here in Fort Worth, so I don't think I'm going to run into too much mud. And we didn't really have any heavy wind or anything like that, so I don't think any of the leaves or anything should have really blown down. So fingers crossed as far as what we find. I just got back from southern Utah about 3 weeks ago. You're probably going to be watching this video before I get any of the video from that trip put together, simply because I've got like 140 clips I've got to go through. But that trip was really good. I actually got there. In some areas I was too late for fall color. In other areas I timed it pretty well. The fact that it's 3 weeks later and now December here in Fort Worth just kind of speaks to the weird seasons we have here in, well, northern Texas, but the southern part of the country. I really wasn't thinking that we were going to get much in terms of fall color. I had pretty much written it off just a few days ago. And like I said, just the other night when I woke up the next morning, it seemed like everything kind of popped overnight. We usually don't have very good color here. Last year was an aberration for sure. If you're not familiar with the kind of fall color we had last year, you can go check out my free ebook and a shameless self-promotion, an explosion of color that you can get on my free downloads page on my website. But just absolutely phenomenal color last year. And I don't think we're gonna have quite that good a color this year, but from what I've been seeing driving around the last couple of days, things are looking pretty good. So I'm kind of anxious to get up to the park and see what we find. I've got about 20 minutes to get there. I'm gonna get there right around sunrise. So I'll check back in once I'm at the park and hiking in a little bit. And once we start getting some light, we'll have a better idea of what we're looking at. All right, so I'm at the park. Kind of per the usual, the upper part near the entrance doesn't look all that phenomenal, but that's usually not where things are in the best shape for whatever reason. When there's a drought, everything gets super brown and looks dead. In the fall, there's never really any color, but I just go down like a 20-foot elevation drop and suddenly I start getting all this color. So we're just going to mosey on down this little trail here and see what we find. Looks like there's 3 other cars here at the park, which is probably the slowest I've ever seen it. One advantage of being able to come out here in the middle of the week. Well, on a Friday at least. But I'm definitely getting into some promising little signs of color. As usual, I'm having trouble pointing on screen, but yeah, colors are looking pretty good so far. So fingers crossed, that's what we continue to find. When I come out here, I don't really have a set plan in terms of, oh, holy cow. Let me finish that thought real quickly and then turn around. But anyways, when I come out here, I don't really have a set plan in terms of where I'm going to go or specific compositions or anything like that. I've been to this park countless times, dozens and dozens of times. So I know it fairly well. I know some specific compositions, but I prefer to just come up here and typically just kind of wander, and just like I approach going anywhere, whether it's to Utah or Colorado or any of my bigger trips, just show up and wander and see what I find, see what new things I might find, rather than going in with some preconceived idea or anything like that. There are a couple compositions I always have to check. The Witch, if you're familiar with my work, and our old oak tree, I always have to check that out just to see how it's doing and if there's anything new and interesting with it. But anyways, enough of that. That color is looking pretty darn good. So I'm going to continue walking here, keeping my eye open for any compositions. And maybe the next time I check in, I'll have something set up and framed, and I can talk you through it. So there's definitely a ton of color, which is great. The challenge I always have at this park is finding compositions I can frame up without distractions, interference from other trees. This is not a location for any grand vista views or anything like that. Down here it might look like it potentially, but just getting up a little elevation in the distance over the hill ahead of me here are water tanks and I think radio towers and things like that. So you just don't have a real good vista type view layout here in North Texas, primarily just because we've got such awful, awful elevation. These are like some of the biggest hills in North Texas, which ain't saying much. What's interesting this year is the color. Last year there was a lot of vibrant oranges and reds, or I should say oranges and yellows. This year, a lot more on the red side. Looking in here, actually, this little area right in there is where I shot Letting Go, one of my favorite photos from last fall. And last year, it was much oranger. So that's interesting to see. Gives a little bit of a new take on some familiar locations. Yeah, so anyways, I'm just going to continue to wander here, but the color is definitely good. And actually, in some regards, you can see looking here, it looks like I'm actually still a bit early. I've got some bare trees. I've got bare tree in there, but then you can see there's still, I don't know why the video is choppy here, but there's still leaves that have hardly started to turn yet. So looks like I've got maybe a good week of coming back here, take advantage of these colors. And there's a better look at Letting Go composition from last year with that tree kind of arching over from the right to the left and the dead tree below. So anyways, enough yammering. So I have to admit, I'm still in the first part of the park, so I haven't really done much exploring yet. I'm struggling a bit to find any compositions. I thought this could be of interest because those little dead or bare trees, shrubs, whatever you want to call them back there, they've got some really great patches of light bark, or maybe bark has been stripped off, I'm not sure. The problem is their background just doesn't quite cooperate. Again, I'm over here by where I shot Letting Go, but I don't want to just shoot the same things, and it's not as good as it was last year anyways. I was going to take a cut through when I go back down that way. There's a little cut through to get to the other big meadow in the park where I shoot the witch. But looking kind of up and over in the distance, it looks like there's some pretty good color along the main trail, so I don't want to necessarily do that cut through. I just want to see maybe there's some new opportunities, like I said, stuff I haven't noticed before or shot before. And the other thing is, with the color, you get new opportunities just simply from the fact that the fall color's not the same every year, so you've got different color contrast you can play with. The trees, obviously, some lose their leaves sooner or later from year to year, so you can play with that. So just because last year maybe an area didn't have any opportunities doesn't mean it won't necessarily this year. And what I'm looking for is kind of stuff, turn back around, like these bare branches, or what I've got, where'd it go again, with Letting Go, where you've got the contrast of the dead tree that's very stark and brighter colored versus the surrounding foliage. Looking for that type of contrast of shape and color and light. I haven't seen anything yet, and the sun is coming up, but there are some low clouds on the horizon back there, so it's kind of fading in and out, which is fine, but obviously to make the colors really pop, especially these reds, I do need a little bit more light. So I think I'm just gonna head back on up to the main trail from the meadow I'm in now, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. Right now, like I said, I'm just not really seeing anything that jumps out at me. Spectacular color, just struggling to find some compositions. So we'll just continue our way on and keep our fingers crossed. It's not to beat a dead horse, but I'm up in the top part of the park again. And again, it's only like a 40 or 50 foot elevation change, but you can see, hopefully you can see, I got the sun right in my face, what a difference it is from a foliage standpoint. the stuff up here is either basically totally green still or totally dead looking. This is the area that the last 2 summers has been hardest hit from the drought. So when I was here back in August, this was all just brown and orange foliage already. Last year it bounced back and ended up still being kind of decent in the fall, but this year maybe it's just 2 harsh summers in a row, but it is just looking absolutely dismal. But just like in August when this area looked so awful and damaged from the drought, I come up here to, again, another just little downhill part of the path. And whether it's, again, soil or microclimate or just that little elevation change, as soon as I get to this point, I go from basically a dead forest or a dead woodland to a totally vibrant area of the park. So this is what I was expecting, but you never know. But it has worked out as expected. And I'm not even all the way down the little hill yet, and you can see what a total difference it is in terms of color. So again, maybe something new will stand out to me this year here. The sun currently is out, as you probably saw in the background, and a little harsh. So it's always that game of working with the morning sun, and either it's too harsh or it's too soft or it's behind a cloud. But you just gotta sometimes be patient and wait for a cloud to drift in or out. But first things first, I gotta find a composition. It's still kind of a cool, partially dead tree, but still nothing is really jumping out at me at this point, other than things I shot last year, which again, I do not want to do unless they're significantly different from a color standpoint or combination of bare branches and foliage. Don't want to just repeat the same thing, because what's the fun in that? So, wind is picking up. Of course, it was nice and calm before the sun rose. Now we're getting into some wind. It's still supposed to be pretty calm today, but I dealt with the same thing last year where I was having to shoot at some higher ISOs to deal with the wind, which is fine. I got no qualms shooting, 800, 1600 ISO on the Canon R5 or even the R, and especially with new AI DeNoise tools and Lightroom and other things. I ain't worried about that. High ISO ain't gonna scare me. What is gonna scare me is not finding a comp. Okay, as you can probably see in the background, I have no idea what I'm pointing at, but we've got some sunlit foliage in the background. I think I'm gonna try the 100 to 400. See if I can get a tight shot. There's some kind of reddish orange foliage on one of the trees in the mid-ground, surrounded with some leaves in the further background that are still pretty green, a little bit of yellow and orange is splashed in. So see if I can kind of frame the one with the other. The light's a little harsh, but I think it's workable. The main thing is here, I just want to take a shot. Apparently I need to clean my tripod after the dust of Utah. Things are a little crunchy. And if I do think that light's too harsh, there are still some clouds at play here. I might be able to get it to soften up a little bit. I'd like to get up a little higher, unfortunately. That just isn't doable, because the ground actually slopes downward behind me here, so nothing I can do about that. I've got my circular polarizer adapter on for the Tamron 100-400. I think I am going to just leave that on and probably polarize this a bit, since again we do have some harsher light that'll help control some of that glare. Make sure my stability is off. And I think I want to do this as a horizontal. And of course, here comes the wind again, so let's make sure we're getting a quick enough shutter speed here. The other trick is I don't want to include the sky. And I'm also getting, there's these trees kind of closer to the trail. They're cutting into the frame. And I do not have the depth of field to get those in focus, in addition to my main subject back there. So I'm having to zoom in, and I'm just gonna have to play around with the framing here. Right now I'm at about 350 millimeters. Like going a little tighter. What I hadn't really anticipated is there's some, you're probably not going to be able to see it on the wide angle camera view, video view, but there are some bare, kind of spindly little twiggy branches up and over this foreground tree, and I'm getting those in the lower right corner of my frame, which is not looking the best. So let's see what we can do to counteract that a little bit. That I kind of like. And of course, we're getting a lot of wind now. So I'm at ISO 800, 1/30th of a second, which usually 1/30th is about the minimum will go when there's a little breeze like this. It looks like it's actually calming down. Well, maybe not. Regardless, I'm just going to take a test shot to check my composition, depth of field, and things like that. Yeah, depth of field is a bit tricky on this one. There's more depth between the midground tree that I'm trying to kind of use as a subject against the bigger trees in the background with the greens on them. I might have to go a little more aggressive on the aperture. I'm already at f/16. And depth of field is definitely an issue here. I was not quite expecting that. If the wind was calm enough, I would say easily, let's just do a focus stack, but up in the tops of those trees, there's quite a bit of wind. Let me kind of try to show you the back of the camera screen here so you know what I'm actually talking about. And you're gonna have to bear with me as I hand hold this. It's the big camera's too tall, too high up for this little selfie stick tripod I got. But anyways, the depth of field between this tree here and the greens in the background is just enough that I'm not able to get both in focus. This area, especially down here, must be just a little bit more closer, that much more closer than this, because when I'm focused on that, this is okay. This is quite soft. So again, either I try to hope and pray that we get a huge break in the wind, which I don't think we're going to get as the sun's coming up. I did just crank this up to f/20 to try to get a little bit more depth of field. And of course, that can start introducing some refraction and softening the image. But with a woodland image like this anyways, I'm not too concerned about absolute tack sharpness. It should be okay. So we're going to try this one and see what we can do. If this doesn't work out, I'll probably still try to do a focus stack and just blend it as best I can with the movement. But I think that's going to be pretty challenging to do. Otherwise, I do like the composition. I kind of like how the reds, are framing kind of the right and the bottom, and then you get into the warmer tones there with the greens and golden yellows and oranges in the upper left portion of the frame. Do have a little bit more sky coming in here than I would like, so I could do some cropping in post. I might try to refine this composition in camera too, but I've got to be careful about coming down too much. If we can try to see it here, because then you start getting the tops of these trees in the way, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna have to work with this one for a while here and see what I can get. All right, I'm cheating here. I already took the shot. I'm focusing on these sparse branches back here. They've got just a few leaves left on them, golden leaves. So I zoomed in really tight to make that the focal point. This is definitely a case where I was originally not going to use the or any polarization. I had it dialed pretty much to cancel out any polarization on the CPL, circular polarizer for the less informed. And I was ended up getting too many specular highlights on the leaves themselves, and they were blowing out, and I was losing the color in them. So I dialed in just a little bit of circular polarization. I can throw up on the screen here an example of the shot I took with and without it, but it made all the difference in the world. I had to shoot it at f/16. I left ISO at 1600, same as the previous shot I was taking down the trail, just because there still is breeze coming in and out, as you might be able to see and hear. I think the shot worked out really well. I'm always a sucker for kind of the very tail end of fall color left on bare branches. So I'm feeling pretty good about that one. Looking around, again, color is amazing. The light is definitely starting to become a challenge, but even if I only get these 1 or 2 comps out of this little outing this morning, I'm pretty pleased with just being out here. And I was not expecting color to be like this again this year. Just goes to show, you never know. If we could have color like this every year, and color like we had last year every year, ooh, that'd be nice. That would definitely be nice. North Texas has been pretty lucky the last couple of years in terms of fall. Nice little morning. There's another plane flying overhead. That's the one thing I do not like about this park, is it's not remote enough, it's not large enough to get away from noise. You almost never get any just like total peace and quiet. Maybe early in the morning, but even when I got here, it was the start of rush hour traffic, and there's a 2-lane highway that's getting busier and busier as this area builds up more and more. So you get big trucks rumbling along there and the whole thing. So it's not necessarily peaceful from a quietude standpoint, but it is beautiful. I'm very fortunate to have this little spot so close to home here in North Texas. So I'm going to continue my wander and continue to see what I see. So I told you I always have to stop by and visit the witch. See if I can get that sky from being so blown out. Nope, not really. This is a case, again, I've shot the witch plenty of times. This is one composition or one little scene I do regularly come back to, and I've got no qualms shooting it over and over again, primarily in different conditions. Conditions aren't all that great. I do like the little splash of red there. I don't think we had that quite last year, but the old witch, she's not surrounded by as much color as she was last year when I took the Witch's Firestorm and the Witch's Phantasmagoria, which I'll throw up on the screen here. So again, worth checking out. See if maybe I can get something better. I don't think I can, so I'm going to continue on. Really, at this point, I think the only bucket shot I've got left for the witch is snow. And that's going to be a challenge, because here in North Texas, if you're familiar with our weather in the winter, we might get 1 or 2 times a year where we get some wintry precipitation. Unfortunately, it typically comes or tends to come in the form of ice. Even if we get snow, it almost always starts with ice, which makes the roads much more treacherous than I'm typically willing to go out in. Now, on the plus side, in exciting storytelling, I do have new tires. The factory all-terrain tires that came on my 4Runner were pretty awful in snow, and especially ice. I went with Falcon Wild Peaks, which are supposed to be much better. Had a little bit of experience driving in some very light snow on the roads in Utah in a couple spots. They seem to be okay, but it wasn't enough to really gauge how much better they may be than those tires that came factory. But anyways, that's always kind of limited my trust in going out and trying to shoot anything when we do get a little bit of snow. And again, it's usually preceded by ice. And Texas just doesn't have the infrastructure for road clearing. So they may treat the main interstates and main thoroughfares, but side roads and everything are pretty much untreated, unplowed. And it's just a mess. But that would be the one shot of the witch that I still really want to get, is that beautiful arching oak with some snow on her. Yeah, maybe this will be the year. Who knows? Probably not. I could probably be here another 10 years and not get that shot, but we'll see. I'm thinking there might be an opportunity here. I'm gonna sit here and study this for a minute and see if I think it's worth setting up for composition number 3 of the morning. All right, so that last composition, I ended up working for 15, 20 minutes. It was a bit challenging with trying to keep the sky from encroaching at the top. And I tried some different compositions and ended up having issues with a bare patch of ground in the background kind of intruding. I think I got something that will be acceptable. We'll see. The biggest challenge, well, not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge was the composition with the sky and then the ground interfering. One of the challenges was bright grasses in the foreground, which when I can't eliminate them, I tend to try to embrace them and just make them part of the composition. I tried the polarizer knowing it wasn't going to work because there was no real directional light. It's all just reflected light right now. But the scene was still completely out of any directional sunlight. So the polarizer didn't do anything other than just cut the light across the entire scene and slow down my shutter speed. So anyways, I've probably already thrown up some of the different compositions on the screen at this point of my chatter anyways. But yeah, that one was a little tricky. I loved the gnarly shapes of the trees, or the tree. It was just tough to compose. Now coming around here, it's a little side trail through the meadow where I typically set up to compose my shots of the witch. But this is also where back in, gosh, was it 2020 or early, had it been early 2021, I shot a frame, looking back that way, called Variations, on a foggy morning. And as you can see, the sun is way too strong to get anything now, but there's some definitely beautiful colors back there. But anyways, I've made a couple shots looking out across this meadow. Was it last year, right as fall color was starting, and I think it was early October, we had a pretty good morning of heavy fog, and I came out here and there were a couple deer walking across as I was composing the shot, and that's my shot passing through. Again, I'll throw it up on the screen here. And that variation shot I got a couple of years prior to that. So yeah, it's a nice little spot. The nice thing with this open meadow like this is it allows you to shoot into the edges of the woodland and find those little compositions. Again, contrast of color, contrast of shape and light, bare branches, full branches, so on and so forth. Whereas when you're in the thick of the trees here, it's just so messy, it's really hard to shoot. And I've talked about that in a video previously. So it's always nice when you can kind of get in a spot like this and work with a little bit more open space. I still typically use the 100 or 400 more than anything here. The last composition I did use the 24 to 105, and one of the frame ups I tried was actually getting closer and shooting wider. That's the one I'm really not sure is going to work, but again, we'll see. Otherwise, it's 9 a.m. now. We're about an hour and a half after sunrise, so the sun's going to continue to get harsher. I might try to power through. I'm getting a little hungry, a little tired, but I might try to power through and get to another part of the park where the woodland changes a little bit. It's a little less messy and some taller, kind of neater trees, but it's a good mile further from here, mile and a half. I can never remember. I always think in my mind it's much closer than it actually is. And so I might check that out and kind of turn the rest of this morning into scouting Hopefully I can come up here in the next couple days again. I am getting my second shingles booster shot. So we'll see what that does to me. I've heard it can be pretty rough. So maybe I can get out tomorrow morning or Sunday morning. Today's Friday. Maybe not. Hopefully the color sticks around for a bit. I don't think we've got any bad wind or anything in the forecast. There's no rain in the forecast. And I can get back out here at least 1 or 2 more times. And yeah, try to get here a little earlier. And now that I've seen this first part of the park and know that at least this morning I'm struggling to find a whole bunch of compositions, I might just power through when I come back and get deeper into the park and see what I find. Typically, I don't find as much deeper in for whatever reason. But again, every year is going to be a little bit different, so you never know. Look at that handsome fellow. Came across 3 deer right when I got here this morning. These are the first ones I've seen since. I feel like it's pretty rare to see bucks here too. But that's a pretty good one. It's always nice when I can see them from afar as opposed to coming around a bend on the trail and having one bolt out right in front of me, which has happened sometimes. And that's why I carry extra underwear on these local hikes. Just kidding. Anyways, I am zoomed in quite a bit in case you're worried I'm too close to the deer. So I'm just continuing on. At this point, definitely scouting hike. I've seen a few potential compositions that I can come back to with earlier light, blue hour light, what have you. Not too much is just jumping out at me and screaming and stopping me in my tracks. And I am trying to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that I've shot here so much. Ooh. I don't know if you can see her back there. There's a little deer staring at me right there. Right off the trail. Speaking of scaring the bejesus out of me. Anyways, I've got so many different compositions up here at this point. I'm trying to be aware of the fact that I don't want to just find compositions that are basically the same or similar to what I've shot before, even if it's literally a different composition. For whatever reason, a lot of the trees seem to curve from the right to the left, so they end up looking similar to the witch or some of the other frames I've captured over the years. So, I've seen some decent potential comps, but they're kind of falling into that realm of sameness. Not identical, but same or similar. So, whereas a couple years ago, maybe I would have tagged them on my phone and thought to come back to them. This year, I'm not really bothering because I got so many different compositions last fall. And I've come up here so much in the last few years since the pandemic. Not that I'm worried that I've tapped out this park's potential. But, again, it's just something I'm trying to keep in mind is a great composition is all well and good, but if it looks very similar to others I've already got in my portfolio, then probably not worth stopping, tagging the location, and coming back for it. Specifically, I'd much rather look for something more unique to my work and keep on the hunt for something new. Now, as I go down this little trail here, I'm coming up on that other woodland I had referenced earlier that's a little bit cleaner understory. You don't get as many low, twisted, gnarled, tortured-looking oak trees, which is good and bad. It's great that the understory is cleaner and allows to get some compositions kind of shooting into the woodland. On the downside, because the trees are much taller and straighter, it's harder to find interesting trees without pointing your camera way up into the sky. So this area also seems to never do as well from a color standpoint. I don't know if it's just a difference in the trees or what. Oh, there we got another deer up ahead of us. But anyways, it never seems to do as well with the color. You can kind of see as we get in here, there's some, but there's also a lot of green, which is typically what I find is it just kind of, it's either green or it's brown. So now I'm in that other woodland, and as you can hopefully tell, the understory or underbrush is far thinner, almost non-existent. There's a little bit right along the trail there, but just take maybe 6 to 8 feet of, what am I saying? Just walk out about 6 to 8 feet and you're pretty much in clear ground. Once again though, there's just not much color going on. It actually looks like maybe I'm a little early. Sorry for swinging the camera all around, but especially back there, it's just starting to show the first little hints of turning yellow. It's a little bit more up in that area. If I can get there we go, that's a little better. A little bit of color up in there, but it's still pretty minimal. So I don't know that, right now at least, this spot's gonna have much potential. I'm just kind of looking upwards to see, is there anything interesting going on with the canopy? The light is probably not the best for that right now. On the one hand, it's lighting up the foliage kind of nicely. On the other, it's a little harsh, but you can see there's some pretty cool shapes you can get by pointing upward. So maybe I'll bust out the 14 to 35, maybe the 24 to 105 on the 24 end, and see if I can get anything compelling. Depth of field is always a challenge because you got your lower branches versus higher branches, but when you're shooting so wide, depth of field is less of a challenge, less of a concern. You might be able to see behind me too. It's a little tight, but a little tough, but that is beach, which 2-3 years ago was not there. That was just water. The reservoir, the lake, is really low still. Actually, I think it's lower than when I was here in August, which is weird because we've gotten some rain since then. I guess just not enough to keep up with the drought. Although the drought's improved, so I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so the water level is really low. Sorry, I'm just looking out towards the beach to see if maybe there might be some possibilities there. I can run out there really quickly. Main point is, again, here I am in this kind of different style of woodland. The sky is always a challenge here because, again, if I'm just shooting straight out, I'm just getting basically straight tree trunks, which are not the most interesting thing to look at. There is a lower tree, smaller, younger tree right there that could be of interest. Just starting to get light. Compositionally, it might be tough to get a good frame on that. There's some vines and stuff hanging down that you can't see on the camera or on the video, but they're kind of in the way. So again, this was intended to be, at this point, just scouting. I think I might bust out that wide angle and see if I can get some interesting shots, just shooting straight up basically at the canopy, at least over the trail where it's open. Otherwise, I think from a photography standpoint, I'm pretty well done today. I did just take some little detail shots of leaves along the ground, not in this area, but just further down the trail. So anything I find at this point is probably going to be small scene stuff, but you never know. Clouds are pretty well cleared out, so at this point we're just going to be dealing with harsh sunlight. Actually, I don't see any clouds at this point, so definitely going to be dealing with harsh sunlight, which is going to make things more challenging. So, yeah, not as fruitful as the morning as I would have expected and would have liked, but still, I think I'm going to walk away with, I don't know, 3 or 4 compositions that will at least be worth looking at on the computer and seeing if they look as good there as when I was composing them here in the field. But yeah, still plenty of opportunity to come back here. Fingers crossed that that shingles booster doesn't totally knock me on my butt for a couple days. So anyways, I'm just going to continue to wander around, see what I see. Like I said, maybe I'll find some small scene stuff. And I think at this point I'll probably be checking in when I'm heading back home, unless something really pops out at me unexpectedly. So that's where we're at. Whew. All right, so I didn't really stop and take any more compositions on the way back. Overall, a little bit of a, I'm always hesitant to use the term disappointing when I'm out in nature and, you know, the colors are beautiful, but definitely struggled to find compositions this morning. So like I said, I'm supposed to be getting my shingle shot, or my second shingle shot this afternoon, which might knock me out for a day or two. We'll see. If not, then definitely want to get back up here to the park. You know, I only got to maybe a third of it this morning. There's a whole other section. So coming in the park, I had left. There's also a whole other section off to the right. Admittedly, I've always struggled with the right-hand section. A lot of dense undergrowth, a lot of very just messy. Okay, so I'm obviously back home now. I was in the middle of recording that, and I think my wireless mic died, and that shut off the video without me realizing it. So apologies for that. Anyways, I was talking about the differences in the park and the right side versus the left side. Bottom line is the right side of the park I've always struggled with. It's, as I was saying before it cut off, it's really, really messy underbrush or undergrowth with the trees. It's also kind of like that last woodland area I was in where the trees are a little bit taller and less gnarly and twisted and everything. So most of your compositions are similar in that you're going to be looking upwards or shooting upwards. Also, for whatever reason, the color seems to be different down there for the fall. At least it was last year when the rest of the park was at peak color. That right half of the park was actually well past peak, well past color in general, and was pretty much into the winter death or whatever you want to call it. So anyways, if I can get back out there in the next few days, I probably will go check out that right side of the park. I do have some compositions in the part I was in today that I want to go back and revisit with better light. Anyways, that's where things stand right now. Sorry about the weird ending to this. Certainly didn't anticipate the, the video cutting off as it did. Otherwise, keeping the fingers crossed that the shingles booster doesn't totally knock me on my butt. And with that, I'm just going to sign off. So until next time, take care.